telling the internet lady. All right, pardon the interruption, Dev.
No worries. So you want me to repeat the question for the recording?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So the question is, where do we get the mandate to change meeting dynamics to a more liberating, structured process or whatever, when we are not the owners or the formal facilitators of space? So let's say I'm now in some meeting on Zoom, some meetup on Zoom, or I'm now in a meeting, in a team meeting at work, and it goes horribly, to my subjective view. How do I, first of all, and then how do I change this, suggest something new, get on the path of least resistance to change how we work, and at the end get the acknowledge that the change dynamics was appreciated and brought more value. Does it make sense as a question?
Yeah, I can ask the same sort of question.
Well, first, let's go with clarifying questions, right? So let's try as much as we can to stick to the general pattern, which if I didn't explain, I apologize for Troika. So Dov's given us his sort of the scope of his question. We'll ask some clarifying questions, and then you and I will chop it up and invite Dov to sort of mute himself and turn off his webcam while we discuss his question. And I think a tighter time box seems also relevant in this instance. So what clarifying questions, Thomas, come up for you regarding this challenge?
Yeah, if I hear the question, I think about, because I have meetings and then they have a discussion, but I like to have a dialogue. So I like to move the discussion from a discussion to a more dialogue where everybody is more equal. Is that what you also mean?
Can you distinguish the discussion and dialogue?
Well, yeah, in the discussion, I have the feeling that people need to win. But in a dialogue, it's more like that people share experiences and like 2 + 1 = 4. You know, that the group, effect of the group is more than the sum of the group. And in my feeling, then you have a dialogue.
Yes, so for me, it's less of a question of a discussion versus dialogue, though this is interesting as well. It's more, in a meeting, we have only one voice. You will not cut me now while I talk. So we have only one voice that dominates the discussion. And the more people there are, the more disengagement there will be, because you're bound to not resonate with someone, or someone has something to say, but they will not, because they will not cut you. And if they cut you, then you're left in the middle. So for me, it's more about how to change the dynamics so that the voice of the group, dare I say team, is liberated, meaning there is more weight to what wants to be said, because things can be said in parallel.
So trying to think in clarifying questions, and what I notice is I have like I have so much lived experience around this question. It's like, what additional clarification? So let me just make sure I understand the sort of like big blocks. So it sounds like in terms of like the roles in the contexts we're talking about are sort of are undefined, or you don't have an explicit role, and that the purpose or or outcome of an intervention sounds like changing the group's norm, or like you described, the changing of the dynamics in the group to sort of increase participation and create space for sort of what actually sort of wants to be said in that space. Mm-hmm. Is that about right?
One correction, not changing the group norms, but challenging them temporarily. So the norms are the norms. Do you mind if we step out of the norms for 5 minutes or half an hour or an hour?
All right, great. Okay, so a time box sort of intervention. So a temporary challenge. I like that. Okay, and sort of the context that you're describing, are you describing more like professional context or places, or is this like general wherever?
For me, it's more general wherever. The two totally separate instances, which I suspect might bring the same response, is one is a meetup like yours. Right, I had two other meetups today. So a group of people who, from my perspective, are lost and ineffective and want in some place to split up and swarm, but the norms don't allow that sort of dynamics. And two is at work. Yeah, so like you have a work meeting and there's a team of I don't know what 10 people, mid-management is whatever, and the meeting is just as expected, right? So has an agenda. We go through item 1, then item 2, then item 3, then item 4. Oh, why didn't you do this? And there is very visible disengagement, and it's not my role formally to address this. In both cases.
Right. And that seems like it's the red thread. Awesome. Well, I think I get the gist of it, Dov. Do you have any more clarifying questions, Thomas?
Yeah, the last thing you said it's not my role. So that's very specific, that you feel you don't have the role to intervene or do something.
It's not a matter of feeling, it's a matter of formal role.
Formal role, okay.
At the workplace, at least, it can be part of the formal role. Mm-hmm. Even in a meetup, we are a group of 20 people now in the meetup. It's not my mandate to say, stop, do you mind, Mr. Organizer or Mrs. Organizer, that we do this meetup totally differently?
Yeah. You could do that.
Totally. All right. I think that gives us our clarifying questions, Dov. So if you want to listen while Thomas and I turn off, also totally acceptable. Why not? So Thomas, first question that jumps up to me is like, to what extent do you recognize this sort of situation that Dov is bringing in?
Yeah, I recognize it because I recognize it. You see others disengage in a group meeting or whatever, in a meeting, and then, well, at the moment you recognize that, you want to re-engage them, but as Dolph was saying, you don't have the mandate, and that's a shame. Then the group is missing out of opinions that could be here. I recognize that.
I do as well.
Yeah,
for sure. Like, but even in environments where I may have a mandate, like it may be my job to play the part of like trickster or disruptor or intervener or coach in context. It still, I think, is a relevant question. Like, I translate this into like, how do I influence the norms of the group? And even if that's in this tight sort of time bounded way, like, how is it that I affect some form of influence on
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
seeing. There's a quote from Bill O'Brien that I literally just looked up yesterday that seems particularly relevant, and that is it's mentioned a lot in U theory, and that the success of an intervention is dependent on the inner state of the intervener more so than the intervention itself, right? So it really depends on the vibe and energy that I bring into the space more so than the particular what's or how I go about trying to influence things, right? If I bring a lot of so for me, I might bring I have a lot of sensation of impatience in meetings, right? And so if I bring that sensation of impatience in and really want to hip check, or lower the shoulder and influence things, that tends to trigger other sort of survival rules in people. And I'm met with their defensiveness or resistance or their their sense of hurt for being confronted with my reaction. So that really jumps out at me. So first and foremost, just an ability to to center myself enough to feel grounded and have and catch my breath well enough to be able to offer anything into the space that carries that sort of neutral charge. Seems particularly relevant.
Yeah, I think neutrality is the big thing there. Yeah, that you without the feeling you need to win or you need to. I can relate to that. Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you need to wait a couple of seconds or moments. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's extraordinarily hard as well, especially in a context where I might be actively have stimulus coming my way that gives me a feeling, right?
Yeah.
And the desire that I have as an individual to move away from that feeling or not have that feeling, right? One thing that also comes to mind, if I can find that centeredness, is looking for a subgroup, just to sort of find whatever way I can into the space to bring the process observation, and rather than this is how it is, but just to ask the question if anybody else recognizes this observation that I'm making.
Just feedback. Yeah.
Right. Well, it will also give me a chance to feel some sense of support for continuing on that trajectory of intervention. If I'm not if it's just me in the room, then all right, then it's just me. But if it's me, but if I ask the room and 2 or 3 other people go, yeah, I recognize that as well, then that might create some more basis to do something on that.
Or you could also do it without pointing or looking at yourself, just by saying what you see. I see some people disconnecting in the room. Shall we ask why, or shall we ask if they have any opinions or want to bring something into this meeting that isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. To ask to share the observation.
Yes, to share that observation. Yeah.
No, I noticed that I'm not a fan of nonviolent communication, because I learned it from someone who was a particularly violent communicator, but yeah, it's colored it for me. But the idea of sort of putting it on myself and just hey, this might be me, but this is what I'm seeing in this space, and this is what would really help me to feel more engaged and participate.
You bring in more vulnerability of your own. You state your own observation and not rely on the others too.
Yeah, and to just also give somebody the chance. I noticed even just describing this, I'm just is like really asking for what would help me in that moment. There's a part of me that doesn't want to actually put that out there, and it just wants to go, yeah, how about I minimize the possibility of somebody being able to say no to that expression, but still nevertheless, like to say, hey, this might just be me and where I'm coming from and my expectations, but this is what I'm sort of seeing in the space, and does anybody else see that? And that, if that's the case, then this might help me to participate more. Could be a fruitful route.
But does it mean that you do not conform with the so you don't have the mandate, but you take the mandate to say something about what you observe? You feel the liberty. You always feel or take the liberty to state your observations, or because that can also be hard.
For sure. I have the convenient cocktail of marginal learning disabilities around small amounts of ADHD and high functioning autism that makes it really hard for me to withhold information.
Right.
So I have maybe an advantage in that respect,
right.
In sort of stepping into spaces even when it's not particularly welcome. I can certainly recognize like the sensitivity or the sensation that happens in those spaces, like when I know that I'm speaking to that sacred cow, or I'm pointing at that big thing in the room, like the heart races, and you feel like you're coming into confrontation with whatever the norms are in the context.
And what makes you then take the step of still speaking up, or still sticking up your hand and saying?
Great question. It's probably a survival role, some form of coping strategy that I landed on that is a better probability of having my needs met than not. But if I can think about like, all right, what's the most functional role expression of that sort of survival strategy? And that feels like the process observation. And I guess, especially when I don't have an explicit role, it's kind of tricky, right? If I think about if I showed up to somebody else's meetup and it was a train wreck, God knows I've hosted enough train wreck meetups.
That's a good thing. And then do you like it if people try to rescue the meetup?
So I'm thinking about a very particular instance that was at a conference that I was facilitating. We were doing the exercise Mad Tea Party. And Mad Tea Party, you sync up in these one-on-ones, short interactions of like 1 or 2 minutes per question, and you just rotate. You get a lot of interaction. We had, I think, 60 or 70 people. So the energy was just really cranked up and had this sort of frenetic feel to it. And somebody said, hey, this is a little escalating too much for me. And like, that was good, clear information, but my first reaction was like, oh God, I'm not doing it right, and she was clean and relatively neutral, just expressing what she meant, or what she sort of needed in that space. And it took me like one entire rotation of the set, so like some amount of time, like 3 minutes, in order to like internalize that in such a way that I could figure out what an intervention might be. So to like go through that process of like, I'm not good enough, to like actual action. So I guess like recognition on the flip side, coming back to this idea of like internal state, of like recognition of like, hey, there's a high probability that any intervention is going to like trigger somebody in a particular way is also feels very salient. But that's only in these meetings where there is somebody sort of in charge. If I think about like my professional life, the vast amount of meetings that are just sort of on our calendar, and there's nobody who has an explicit in charge no matter what, that also seems like that for whatever reason seems even more fraught, because there's not a central, or there's nobody bearing that responsibility, which I wonder if that would make it harder or easier. Does that make it easier to step up and say, I'll take responsibility for this thing no one is caring for?
For me, it does. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that, Thomas?
Yeah, because I like meetings to be effective, and if it's not going anywhere, I like to step in and then say, oh, all right, guys, this is great, but where do we go? What is our goal? Like not sitting an hour together and then go away and then still have no idea what to do, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah. So you find it easier to step into that absence of responsibility.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. And if
I
another one is in charge, I'm like, okay, you're in charge. And if I'm in charge and someone else steps up, then I'm like, okay, now you do it. And I easily give it away as well.
Interesting. So I noticed that in those, there's a trickiness to those moments for me when nobody's sort of in charge, because then we're really like on automatic pilot collectively. And then I'm really sort of bumping up into like, well, that is just the way we do things around here. So I think one thing that Dove said that seems particularly relevant is this idea around like time boxing, to just say like, hey, for just this window of time, could we try something different, like for a limited space of intervention?
Yeah.
And I notice also storytelling is also comes up for me in this instance, like the way in which, like, I think of most of Agile as like done well as like storytelling, like, hey, I heard about somebody who had a situation similar to this and they tried X, could we try that? Also feels like a good route.
But then you that's I think that's first you need to stick up your hand, and I wonder if that's difficult as well. Well, that I think that's difficult for some people to just stick up their hand and to notify that they want something to say or to change or to bring into the meeting.
Right.
Because that's an intervention as well. As soon as you do.
For sure. So the finding that moment of like stepping over the static resistance to like to just do anything and get over that hump. For sure. Yeah, it's funny, I really don't know much about that. Like, I always have so much the opposite problem, which is like, how do I shut my goddamn mouth?
Right. Yeah, me too, I think. Yeah. Sometimes I have to sit on my hands to just let the process go and see where they go.
Yeah, and in that respect, like maybe so one of the things I really enjoy is like just test cards, right? Formalized hypothesis. All right, so what do I believe? Like, so I have an opinion. I think that, if the meeting keeps going this way, we're not going to get shit done. And so my specific intervention, or the baseline for an experiment, might be, I'm not going to do anything. And, the things that I'm going to look for are, what are going to be the telltale signs of not getting shit done? We might not move through all the agenda items. We might not make decisions where we need to. We might have these moments of let's come back to this. And if I'm wrong, if we are seeing productivity might look like, making clean decisions, checking off items in a succinct way, moving through items with some form of speed, having broad participation. Like that's that form of nil hypothesis. So I like to use strategizer test cards to make explicit hypotheses.
And how do you use them? Do you write things down and all right, he says timeout.
Yeah. Come on back to what do you got for us?
Just what's the time box of this process?
Yeah, that feels good. That feels like the time box today.
We're there.
Yeah. So what seemed particularly salient for you in hearing our back and forth?
Okay. So the two things that resonated is one, to let go of your ego.
Yeah.
To validate that what you have to say out of the good of the whole room and what needs to be said, and not out of your, you wanting to have a voice and say, this is not good, I'll tell you what is good. And two is looking for allies. And for the first point, if you come from that posture, then there's no worries if your hypothesis is wrong. Like if you say, I think we can do this better in this form or that, and the voice in the room says, no, it's fine, then you don't take it personally at all.
And still your voice is heard, and you give others a chance to say, no, I also think it's not fine. So you open up. And
yeah, but if at the end the voice of the room is, this is fine, that's how we want it to be done, then you don't sit in the corner and feel an outcast. So these are the points. For the exercise itself, I think it was too much for me. As the person who had the inquiry, to sit and listen, I felt that the conversation diverted a lot from my question. And that I had no power in the rules of the game to move it back there or say that it's enough, thanks a lot. So I think if I would do it, I would have a very clear time box.
Well, we can do that. Let's give it a go. What is a clear time box? I'm going to go to the single source of truth. Let's see.
I still have around about 15 minutes, and then I need to go to something else.
Yeah, that is 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. All right, let's give it a go. Thomas, you can step in, or shall I?
Where should I step in?
Yeah, well, do you have a question or any subject matter that you'd like consultation on?
All right, yeah, it's close to the question Dov had. Yeah, I sometimes have meetings, and then we have some sort of dialogue or a conversation, and then people say, no, it's enough conversation, it's enough dialogue, we need to go on. But I always think these discussions or dialogue or conversations are precious. They hold information. We can retract information. So then they stop it. I think that's a shame. So the question is, what to do?
So
And
it sounds like
okay, all right. The question is, how can we facilitate these discussions, the dialogue, conversations, without people feeling the need to step in and close this conversation? And we tried with smaller groups and split up and come together again. That's what. But then if we come together again, then a whole new discussion starts.
all right. Clarifying questions. So it sounds like the basic idea is that people want to sort of limit dialogue or time-bound exchanges that you think are valuable and should sort of go on. Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about the context that this is happening in?
It's we're now figuring out how to recreate our customer management system, and we are creating models and stuff, and then we have discussions about families. How do you represent families or companies? What kind of relations do they have? And then in between all these lines, and people say, yeah, but if someone dies or this happens or that happens, in all these use cases, there's information and people hook into that. That's the kind of the context. Is that clear?
Yeah, so you guys are in a product development sort of
Right. Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. And then I have the feeling that all the things people bring up, especially if you're not, if no decisions have been made, then all the information needs to be gathered and structured, and at least that's my feeling. So I want to hear it. I'm very curious in these use cases, because yeah, could be something we need to work with.
Any additional clarifying questions for you, Dov?
Yeah, for me, it's still not clear in the sense of where is the limit between the question. I'll try to rephrase what I understand. You say we are looking for solutions before we understand the problem completely.
Right, we're in the problem space.
Okay. And the question is how to give more space to the problem space.
Well, there are people who think, and they step in hard, really hard, and say, enough discussions, we need to move on. And then I very often have the feeling, well, this discussion or this, and maybe it's not even a discussion, maybe it's it's a dialogue, it's an exchange of information. And then I'm like, that's a pity, because some value could be in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And most of the time, I think, okay, that this is a discussion or something we need to redo later, because it doesn't go away.
Well, then let's try out our tighter time box. We'll put 7 minutes on the clock for consultation. And Thomas, if you could either turn around or mute yourself and turn off your webcam, Dev and I'll chop it up for you.
So the one thing that comes to mind is the famous saying of Einstein, which is always useful because it's Einstein. So who can argue with that, right? It says if I have 1 hour to find a solution, I would spend 59 minutes to define the problem. And if you quote someone as smart as Einstein, you will get half the room on your side.
Exactly. There's an American version with Abraham Lincoln. If I have an hour to chop down a tree, I'll spend 59 minutes sharpening the axe, right? Doesn't quite work as well as Einstein, but same general sentiment. I think using that heuristic and also like the design thinking framework could be also particularly welcome as a way of saying, hey guys, but this is a part of information that we really want to make sure that we have figured out if we are in fact in the problem space. But even if we're in the solution space and people have differences of opinion, on one hand I can see both I don't have a lot of patience for people doing this yeah but thing in conversation, where I go, you say topic A and I go, yeah, but topic B or topic Z. So I find wicked questions are particularly useful in those environments that can stimulate the dialogue to be in a more generative space. So, that looks like, how is it that we topic A and topic Z at the same time so that we can create some new cognitive space?
Yeah, but there's also a lot of and there's a lot of other questions. Like one question that comes to mind is, how do we know that we solved the real issue, for example? And so I think there's a lot of questions like that you can put in the solution space discussion to pull it a little bit back. And another thing that you might want to try is to say, let's make one team to discuss the problem. So not everyone in the room is into philosophizing or I don't know what, inquiring too much. All of the people that want, let's just solve the issue and what do we do now? All of them are not, are invited not to join this team if you want. So let's have an offline discussion to see that we understand the problem enough. Who wants to join me?
Yeah, making some more explicit space. There's a couple of things that also jump out in terms of like, part of the problem or challenge could be around documentation, right? That there's information sort of in the air and in between people's heads that I don't feel like I'm getting down or I'm not capturing in such a way. So that might be an invitation to use something along the lines like simple ethnography, like to just have somebody in a call that is taking minutes or taking notes, that is just capturing information as it sort of comes out in real time. Might be a functional role that can help us get the essence of that. I also like this idea of like making conversation explicit, of being like, okay, so 5 minutes on the clock, everybody for the A side of the topic, and 5 minutes on the clock, everybody for the Z side of the topic. This is a particular thing that you see a lot in deep democracy, where we just invite everybody in the room to just, all right, adopt one perspective. What's all the advantages of it? Adopt another perspective. What's all the advantages of that perspective? And sort of like sift through, so to speak. That might be able to way to sort of contain that dialogue and in such a way that makes it easier to sort of collect and collate the information together. And also helps provide that time boxing of, hey, this is a conversation that will not last forever, but we do want to get some information down.
Another thought I have is, what if the room is right? What if it is true that we dig too much into the problem space and there's it annoys the system? It does more harm than good, because people lose patience, lose faith in the process or whatever. Do I allow this to be true, even if I feel that I want more on the inquiry side? So just like before, do I let go of my ego and I'm there to serve the group, and if the group resists, more inquiry, then I respect that, and I am totally I'm totally recruited for that.
Yeah, and there's also like what I like in this line of inquiry is that there's a real like space of recognition that we don't all have the same roles in the context, right? So whereas from a team perspective of people developing the solution, this might be needed levels of abstraction and details that actually makes a difference. But from like the product owner perspective, like I don't give a shit how you guys do it, just fucking do it, right? That might be very real. Like they might be looking at their clock going, ooh, I've got 20 more minutes before I have to get on to another call. And I have 4 other subject topics that I want to make sure we address. For me, this is already, I don't care.
Yeah, but now you touch something touchy, because for me, the main work of the product owner and the place where the product owner most of the time fails is to help the team connect to the pain. And most product owners come already with what they want, not the how they want it, but what they want. While what the team needs is exactly what Thomas asked for, is the understanding of what is the pain that wants to be addressed.
Precisely. Well, that's our time box for this guy. So Thomas, why don't you come back and tell us what you take away from this dialogue or exchange?
Right. Here I am. Yeah, nice. Sweet one. I like the quote of Einstein. That could be very strong, but you can only use it once. And then maybe you can use the wood chopper chopping wood.
By the way,
And that should be a T-shirt.
You can also make
the quote of
your
Einstein.
own quotes. You can make up any quotes you want and put the Dalai Lama or whoever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true as well. You can just fake quotes. You can, maybe we can generate a fake quote generator. Yeah, no, that yeah, and I heard something out. Wicked questions. Is that a liberating structure thing?
Wicked questions is a particular liberating structure. There's also a related the process to answer a wicked question you'd call integrated autonomy. Right? Wicked questions poses this: how is it that we A and Z at the same time? Integrated autonomy just says, all right, first brainstorm A, first brainstorm Z, and then see if there's anything in the middle of these things that you can pull out.
Right. I'm going to look into that. Right. And what I also liked was, let me see. Oh God, this is something else. Yeah, here we are. Yeah, how do we know that we solve the right question? And don't invite the solution pushers. That was something like prep it and say we're going to dive into this problem space, and we're going to have some discussion. So prep the meeting and say, well, this is what we're going to do. So if you're really a solution kind of guy, maybe you shouldn't be there, or maybe you give them an incentive to not jump in and break these discussions. That's what I liked. And the making conversations explicit, that was like everybody on the A side, and then so invite them to see the other side. But yeah, so then you have to intervene. So then you have we have this meeting, and some discussions erupt, and then you have to step in. All right, this is a very good discussion. Can we switch places? But yeah, so I have to then step in before the other people step in saying this is too big of a discussion, not here, not now. This is not the time and place. So then I have to intervene before I see these people getting frustrated.
Yeah, perhaps, and this is the 10,000, the $1 trillion innovation, I think, in the space that we're all trying to land on is how do we build a norm that before we handle the topic, the subject matter, that we figure out how we're going to address the subject matter. And to any choice that we make in that space is a good choice, better than making no choice whatsoever. So if you can build that cultural competency or skill to say, all right, so this is the subject matter, what's the right question that we're trying to answer here, and how might we use a tool or strategy or liberating structure, a process of inquiry that explicitly helps us check that box or answer that question.
Yeah,
we're in good shape.
Right. So you're saying that I could prepare myself, have these questions, prepare myself, and ask them, would you like to try this liberating structure, or do it that way, this way, to give more direction?
I mean, ideally, so in my fantasy world, for every subject, for every topic, I would have a different tool that I'm going to use to address that topic.
Right.
Because chances are each topic is a very different thing. Some topics are gathering information,
Right.
some are making decisions, some are looking back and reflecting on data, some are expert opinions, right? So I want to know, okay, what are we trying to accomplish in that topic, and how are we going to treat it? That's the question that I don't see asked quite near often enough.
Right. So preparation is key there for me. If I'm directing this meeting, right?
For sure. I would say, yeah. Preparation is there's no substitute for it. Like with time you need less preparation. But like having had a thought to be able to just offer, okay, for topic A, we're going to use this,
right?
Is good stuff. Well, gentlemen, Thomas, if that's your time.
Thomas, I just have one more anecdote for you. If you want,
sure.
Which I like to use, that during the Cold War, the Americans spend a lot of money to build a pen that writes in zero gravity, that doesn't flow, and all of that.
I have one.
Yeah,
this is actually one.
and the Russian took a pencil.
Right, I know. Yeah.
So like this is an anecdote that I always use to know, because the point is, wow.
Fisher Aerospace pen. This is the pen you're talking about. Very fun. Yeah, the Russians had a pencil. Yeah.
And this is like a great illustration that you have to understand what you're trying to solve before you solve it.
Yeah.
And what's nice about this one is that the problem that the Americans were trying to solve was sending combustible material into space. So under that premise, it becomes a reasonable solution. But yeah, for sure. How funny that you have that pen, Thomas. Like, you can't make that shit up, right?
That's an what you're saying. You need to know the answer before you know the answer.
No, you need to understand well what's the question that you're trying to solve. Because is the problem that you need a pen, or is the problem that you need to write stuff?
Right. Yeah.
And if you stop the discussion at we need a pen, then you will spend a lot of energy creating a pen. But if you dig deeper and you understand that you need something to write, then your whole solution might be different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I always have a tendency to look at, we need something to write. Yeah.
But even that, why do you need to write? So like you can always go deeper. Do you really need to write, or do you need to remember stuff? Like what sort of stuff do you need to remember? Why do you need to remember? Like you can go, many, and that's why, like, there is the 5 whys.
Yeah.
And I hate this name. I call it why until you die. Because like you can ask why from here to the end of the world, and at the end really to do nothing. So they're right, all these guys that tell you that you ask why too much.
Could be.
Even in Einstein's case, yeah, you spend 59 minutes understanding the problem, but the 1 minute of talking about the solution is important as well.
Yeah.
Damn right. And on that bombshell, I think that's a good. That's the quote that I want to end this call on. So, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Wait,
appreciate
Jeremy, you have 10 minutes. Can you stay 10
for sure.
more?
Yeah, totally. Let me turn this thing off. We can chop it up.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Thomas. Appreciate you hanging out.
Discovering you.
Where is this thing? This is going to be the worst part of the recording.